Hey guys, tonight we step into a world so still, so quiet, that even your thoughts might hesitate before echoing. You're about to spend a night inside a 14th century Japanese monastery, a place where time isn't measured by clocks but by the slow rhythm of temple bells and the drifting scent of incense. You'll walk through mist-cooled courtyards, taste meals that are humble yet holy, and maybe, just maybe, discover how silence can feel louder than sound. You probably won't survive this in real life. Trust me, the lack of coffee alone would send you running, but here, you can simply drift along, safe and warm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there, so drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sound you hear is a deep, resonant gong, rolling through the pre-dawn fog like the heartbeat of a sleeping mountain. The bell tower stands in silhouette against a faint silver sky, its curved roof tiles slick with dew. You pull your rough-woven robe tighter and step out of your narrow sleeping space, a simple tatami mat in a room barely wide enough to stretch your arms. Outside, the world feels paused, suspended between darkness and dawn. The monastery isn't grand the way castles are. It's humble, all wood and paper, the kind of architecture that creaks when you breathe near it. The air smells faintly of cypress and smoke from last night's lamp. You move barefoot through the corridor, the floorboards cold enough to make you flinch, though you pretend not to notice. A second bell sounds, slower, deeper, as if to remind you that no one here hurries for anything. You join the small procession of monks gliding toward the main hall. No one speaks. Communication happens in glances, gestures, and the soft swish of robes brushing the floor. Somewhere beyond the walls, a rooster calls from a distant village, and you think about how ordinary life continues out there. Fishermen waking, merchants lifting shutters, children chasing dogs. Inside the monastery, the world narrows to the size of your breath. The temple grounds stretch across a gentle slope, framed by bamboo and moss-covered stones. The architecture follows the Zen ideal of wabi-sabi, beauty in simplicity, grace in imperfection. Historians still argue whether this aesthetic arose from scarcity or spirituality, but here, it hardly matters. You sense that both ideas share the same quiet truth. Less is more, especially when your life's purpose is to see beyond things. As the dawn finally leaks across the horizon, you pause under the eaves and watch mist coil around the pagoda. It's not tall, just 3 tiers, each one balanced like folded hands in prayer. A crow lands on its tip and caws once, as if announcing your attendance. The morning bell stops ringing. For a moment, there's only the sound of your heartbeat, and then the faint tap of sandals behind you. The abbot appears, his shaved head glinting faintly. He nods, a greeting, a blessing, or a silent reminder that you're late. Hard to tell. You bow deeply and follow him toward the meditation hall. Inside, incense smoke drifts like memory, blurring edges of reality. The room is lit only by paper lanterns whose light feels soft enough to hold. You kneel on the mat, cross your legs, and wait for the day to begin. The first ritual isn't eating or praying, it's existing. Sitting still, breathing, becoming aware of the sound of your own thoughts scratching at the inside of your skull. It's harder than it sounds. Every itch, every whisper of wind feels amplified. The goal, they say, is to observe without clinging, to let sensations rise and fall like waves. A faintly amusing fact: monks in some Zen temples were allowed to slap each other with flat wooden sticks during meditation, not out of anger but to awaken those who drifted into drowsiness. You catch yourself nodding forward slightly, and, yes, you definitely qualify for a gentle whack right about now. Outside, the mist begins to lift. The world grows clearer, though you're not sure if that's the sky or your mind settling. You remember reading once that 14th-century monasteries often stood as the only centers of calm during Japan's turbulent civil conflicts, the Nanbokucho period, when rival emperors ruled north and south. Within these wooden walls, Life followed the older order. Meditate, chant, clean, repeat. You're aware, too, that this peace was a kind of power. Land grants from warlords kept temples wealthy. Peasants sought their blessings before planting or battle. Even as they preached detachment, monks managed vast estates. Historians still argue whether Zen monks genuinely rejected material wealth or simply mastered the art of appearing to. But none of that feels real at this hour. You're just a single breath among dozens, kneeling as morning light begins to slide across the polished floor. The sound of a bamboo fountain outside, the rhythmic tok-tok of falling water, marks the passage of moments that no one counts. A sparrow flutters past the open shoji door, its wings catching a spark of sunlight. For a heartbeat, the whole hall glows golden. You sense something, tranquility, awe, or maybe just the relief of having survived another dawn without caffeine. You exhale slowly, and the breath feels ancient. Around you, voices rise in low chant, each syllable a ripple through time. Somewhere, a temple bell rings again, not as a call to wake, but as an invitation to be. And as the first real rays of sunlight pour through the paper walls, you realize that life here isn't about escaping the world. It's about sitting still long enough to see it as it truly is. The bell fades into the soft hum of morning, and your limbs are already tingling from stillness. You rise when everyone else does. No command, no spoken cue, just the sound of rustling robes and the collective sigh of bodies that have learned obedience down to the breath. The day begins not with chatter or music but with routine, the most sacred rhythms of all. You shuffle toward the washing area, where a long wooden basin gleams with cold spring water. The stone beneath your feet feels smooth from generations of use, and you can't help but wonder how many identical mornings this place has seen. The 14th century didn't have alarm clocks, but it had something much more relentless: discipline. You scoop water into your hands, icy and sharp enough to jolt the last traces of sleep away. The first splash across your face feels like being baptized into monotony, and yet it's oddly satisfying. The monks around you perform the same motion in complete silence. Each gesture, pouring water, wringing cloth, drying hands, is deliberate, graceful, devoid of hurry. They call this ritual koriai, the morning purification. You don't just wash your body. You wash away distraction, ego, and yesterday's noise. Historians still argue whether Zen practice in medieval Japan emerged more from religious devotion or from imported Chinese discipline. Either way, it left its mark, a nation obsessed with order, ritual, and clean lines, even in chaos. You fold your bedding next, pressing it flat, aligning corners like your life depends on it. In a way, it does. A crooked mat invites correction. A lazy fold hints at carelessness. And here, carelessness is the only true sin. The air smells faintly of camellia oil from polished wood and a lingering trace of smoke from the temple's hearth. Through the paper doors, sunlight trickles in, thin and golden, painting long rectangles across the floor. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo flute plays, a monk signaling the transition to the next part of the morning, offering. You follow the line toward the inner altar. Candles flicker in a half-lit hall filled with incense haze. A bronze statue of the Buddha sits cross-legged at the far end, its expression a blend of serenity and smugness, as if it knows something you don't. You kneel, bow twice, and clap softly, an ancient gesture to wake the gods before prayer. You place a pinch of rice before the statue. Just one. It's not waste, it's gratitude. You think about that for a moment, how even one grain represents countless unseen hands, farmers, millers, cooks, and monks who carried it here. Every act in this place feels like an echo of something bigger. And yet, you can't shake the small, human thought that flickers in your modern mind. Would Uber Eats even deliver here? The question almost makes you smile, but you hide it quickly. Humor is not exactly a core monastic virtue. As the chanting begins, you let the low, droning rhythm wash through you. The syllables are ancient Sanskrit filtered through centuries of Japanese pronunciation. It's less a song and more a vibration. You feel it in your chest. You think about how, centuries later, monks would chant the same verses to calm warlords, emperors, and even themselves. One peculiar tidbit from temple lore says that monks who yawn during morning prayers must bite their own tongues, not as punishment, but as a reminder to wake the spirit first. You press your tongue against your teeth out of reflex. No yawning. Not yet. When the chant ends, there's a pause so complete that even your thoughts hesitate to break it. The abbot moves with measured slowness, his robe whispering across the floor. He lights another stick of incense, bows, and nods toward the assembly. That's the signal to rise again. You follow the flow toward the sliding doors, stepping into open air. The courtyard looks washed clean by dew. Every leaf shines as if polished overnight. The mountains beyond the temple walls hover in morning mist, jagged and blue, their peaks catching the first sunlight. You hear the distant rush of a river, steady, timeless. Someone rings a small hand bell, and the sound flutters through the air like a dragonfly. That's when you realize something simple but profound. This entire place runs on sound cues instead of speech. Bells for waking, flutes for gathering, wooden clappers for meals. It's like living inside a musical score composed by serenity itself. The abbot passes you again, carrying a small broom made of twigs. His eyes are half closed, not from fatigue, but from focus. He pauses beside a puddle, watching it reflect the sky, then steps carefully around it. You think it might be symbolic, a lesson about mindfulness, but maybe he just doesn't like wet socks. Monasteries of this era often sat at the edge of mountains or forests, far from towns. They served as schools, libraries, and spiritual centers all at once. In 14th century Japan, many were self-sustaining, growing their own rice, weaving their robes, even making ink from soot. Life here meant learning how to do everything well, but never fast. There's something strange about realizing how fully this world runs without urgency. Even the insects hum slower here. You catch yourself breathing in rhythm with the soft rustle of wind through bamboo. Maybe that's the point, slowing down until you can hear your own pulse syncing with the earth's. A young monk passes carrying a tray of folded robes. He bows slightly and you mirror him, though you're not entirely sure if it's the right number of bows. You've noticed that bows come in different levels. 1 for peers, 2 for teachers, 3 for the Buddha. Historians still debate whether this etiquette came from Buddhist hierarchy or samurai culture seeping into the temple. Either way, it's a small dance of humility. By the time you return to your small quarters, the first warmth of sunlight has filled the room. You kneel, fold your hands, and take a moment to feel grateful for something as ordinary as morning. A fly buzzes by, lands on the edge of your mat, and you resist the instinct to swat it. In Zen practice, even a fly has its lesson, though admittedly, a very annoying one. The abbot's voice finally breaks the silence, soft but clear. Breathe. Just that one word. You inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and in that moment, the entire monastery seems to inhale and exhale with you. The ritual of waking is over. The day has begun. You take your place in the meditation hall, where the air feels heavier than the world outside. Rows of monks kneel perfectly still, like stone statues draped in linen. No one coughs. No one fidgets. The only sound is the faint crackle of incense burning and the slow creak of wooden beams expanding in the morning heat. You settle onto your cushion, a flat circle filled with straw, and cross your legs. Your knees immediately start to complain. The posture looks serene in paintings, but the reality feels like slow, polite agony. You shift slightly, hoping no one notices. Spoiler: everyone notices. A monk walks the aisle, barefoot and solemn, holding the infamous kyosaku, a long, flat stick used not to punish but to wake wandering minds. He stops behind someone, taps their shoulder, and with a gentle whack, strikes them once across the back. The sound echoes softly, almost musical. The monk bows to receive it, and the ritual continues as if nothing happened. You try not to look nervous. This is zazen, seated meditation, the spine of Zen life. The goal isn't to think, but also not to not think. It's one of those paradoxes Zen is famous for, like a riddle the universe asks just to watch you squirm. Historians still argue whether this practice descended directly from Chinese Chan Buddhism or evolved uniquely in Japan. What's clear is that by the 14th century, this kind of disciplined stillness had become a national art form. You close your eyes and try to focus on your breath. In, out. In, out. The smell of sandalwood grows stronger. Your mind drifts to home, to warmth, to what you might have for lunch. Spoiler again, it's rice. Then, as if reading your thoughts, the walking monk pauses behind you. You bow slightly from the waist, signaling permission. The Kyosuke descends, asterisk thwack, asterisk, a sting that flashes across your back, but strangely, it clears the fog in your mind. You breathe in, breathe out. This time it feels different. Outside, a soft breeze nudges the paper doors, letting a sliver of light sweep across the tatami. You hear the rustle of bamboo, the chirp of a single bird, and realize that every sound, every shift of air, is part of the meditation itself. You think about how monks used to train for years just to master the art of sitting. No degrees, no promotions, just the slow, eternal refining of posture and patience. And while it seems mind-numbing, the discipline here shaped everything from samurai strategy to Japanese tea ceremonies centuries later. The stillness wasn't just spiritual, it was practical training for clarity under pressure. You can almost imagine a warlord sneaking into a monastery once, thinking he'd learn Zen calm in a weekend, then leaving after 10 minutes because his foot fell asleep. Somewhere in your numb legs, a pulse of pain throbs. You let it exist. You watch it. The abbot once said pain is a teacher too, one with terrible bedside manners. The air grows warmer as sunlight floods the room. You can smell cedar from the pillars and faintly, the sweet, smoky scent of tea brewing somewhere beyond the hall. A small bell chimes. Meditation ends, though it doesn't really end. It just changes shape. You bow once to the Buddha, once to your cushion, and rise carefully, trying not to topple over like a folding chair. Walking out into the courtyard, your legs feel like wet noodles, but your mind hums with an odd stillness. The garden is brighter now. The mist is burned off, leaving everything sharp and alive. The rocks gleam with dew, and a monk in the distance is refilling a stone basin, the water trickling in a steady rhythm. One of the younger novices passes by, carrying a tray of steaming tea for the senior monks. He looks about 15, face still soft, eyes heavy with the kind of sleep deprivation only spiritual ambition can cause. He smiles faintly and nods, and you return it, just two souls caught in the long quiet of morning. You think about how monasteries were once schools too, teaching calligraphy, medicine, and philosophy. Some even taught martial arts, though in a slow, graceful form that resembled moving meditation. There are scrolls describing monks who could defend themselves with walking sticks, though, to be fair, history might have exaggerated a few roundhouse kicks for dramatic effect. The abbot's voice breaks through your thoughts, calm and steady. When your mind is still, the world reveals itself. He doesn't say it as a quote. He says it as if the air itself whispered it to him. You follow the others toward the veranda, where they stand facing the rising sun. No prayers, no speeches. Just presence. The light touches the eaves of the temple roofs, turning them gold. For a moment, the world looks too perfect to be real. A dragonfly flits past, its wings catching light like shards of glass. You feel a small, inexplicable joy, one of those emotions that doesn't ask permission before arriving. The monks would call it kensho, a glimpse of enlightenment, brief and dazzling. It's not permanent, but it's enough to keep you sitting through the pain tomorrow. There's an old Zen saying, asterisk before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Asterisk the point is, nothing really changes except how you see it. The chores, the hunger, the silence, they stay the same. It's your mind that loosens its grip. And as you stand there, breathing in the scent of pine and incense, you start to understand. Maybe enlightenment isn't some dramatic awakening at all. Maybe it's just the slow realization that you're already where you need to be. The gong sounds again, deep, deliberate, final. Meditation is over. Breakfast awaits, and the rhythm of the monastery rolls on, unchanged for centuries. You turn, bow once to the hall, and walk toward the faint smell of rice and pickles, your feet padding softly against the polished wood. The day continues, not as a series of events, but as one long, unbroken breath. The scent of rice drifts through the hall before you even see the bowls. It's a simple smell, clean, earthy, faintly sweet, but in the quiet of a monastery, it feels like a celebration. You join the line of monks, each one moving with measured precision, robes whispering against the floor. No one speaks, not even to murmur a greeting. Everything about this meal is ritual, sacred choreography practiced to perfection. Breakfast, or chashaku, is served in a room that feels more like a meditation hall than a dining area. The light is dim, filtered through paper screens. The bowls are arranged in neat, geometric rows. One for rice, one for soup, one for pickled vegetables. Wooden chopsticks rest across the top like small bridges, perfectly parallel. You kneel on your cushion, your knees already protesting again, and wait. The abbot sits at the head of the room. His eyes remain closed for a full minute before he gives a slow nod. That's the signal. Everyone bows once, then twice, and the meal begins, not with eating, but with a chant. The words roll through the room like the tide. Asterisk. We reflect on our efforts and the gifts of others. We take this food to fulfill our vow. Asterisk. You don't know all the lines, but the rhythm is hypnotic. You feel the sound vibrating in your chest. Only after the final syllable fades do you lift your bowl. The rice is plain, no salt, no sauce, but the first bite feels strangely profound. You chew slowly, each grain soft but distinct. Every motion is deliberate, every swallow part of a centuries-old meditation on gratitude. Historians still argue whether monks truly embraced this minimalist diet out of devotion or practicality. Food was scarce in medieval Japan, after all, and monasteries relied on donations from nearby villages. Whatever the reason, the philosophy stuck. To eat simply was to live purely. Your second bowl holds thin miso soup. It's barely seasoned, more water than paste, but the warmth seeps through your chest like comfort distilled. Floating inside are a few slices of daikon radish and, if you're lucky, a stray cube of tofu.
You are lucky today.
Enlightenment clearly favors tofu. A monk across from you coughs once, and everyone freezes for half a second. In the monastery, even a small sound ripples like a pebble in still water. He bows his head, ashamed, and you realize that here, silence isn't just golden, it's expected currency. A fringe tradition says that monks sometimes name their chopsticks after virtues, patience and compassion, for instance, so they'd remember not to rush or complain about the food. You can't help but think your chopsticks would be called try and again, given how many times you drop a grain of rice. Halfway through the meal, you notice how the act of eating transforms into something almost cosmic. Each motion, lifting, tasting, swallowing, is a dialogue with the universe. The abbot once said that a single bowl of rice contains the whole sky, the mountains, and the rain that nourished it. It sounds poetic until you realize he means it quite literally. Outside, a crow caws, its sound muffled through the thin paper walls. You imagine the bird watching from the rooftop, wondering why 50 humans are eating in slow motion. The monks eat without wasting a single grain. When you finish, you pour hot water into your rice bowl, swirl it to clean the sides, then drink it. This isn't weird here. It's part of the meal. Nothing is wasted. You wipe the bowl dry with a small cloth and fold it neatly, the corners aligned just so. The entire breakfast lasts about 15 minutes, though it feels timeless. There's no idle chatter, no rush to finish, no checking the time, which conveniently no one has. When it's done, everyone bows once more, hands pressed together in thanks. You think of your modern breakfast routine, scrolling through messages, gulping coffee, maybe half a slice of toast, and for a fleeting second, you feel oddly guilty. Then you laugh quietly to yourself, remembering the abbot's favorite phrase, *, awareness first, guilt never. *, after the meal, The bowls are stacked in perfect silence, like nesting dolls. A young novice collects them and walks off with a grace that makes balancing 50 ceramic bowls look effortless. The abbot rises slowly, his robe whispering against the tatami. He looks around the room as if seeing each monk for the first time. His gaze lands on you for half a heartbeat, and though he says nothing, you feel acknowledged, seen, but not judged. Breakfast ends not with a signal, but with movement. Everyone rises in unison, steps backward to bow, and files out through the sliding doors. The smell of incense lingers behind, faint but comforting, like a dream you can still half remember. Outside, the world has brightened. The mist is gone, replaced by sunlight that filters through tall pines, throwing thin shadows across the gravel. A few monks sweep the courtyard, their straw brooms whispering across the ground. Others carry buckets toward the vegetable garden. No one wastes a second. In a monastery, idleness is the closest thing to a crime. Historians believe that some monasteries in the 1300s even tracked daily chores on wooden tablets, assigning each monk by rotation. The schedule rarely changed. Meditation, meals, chores, study, and sleep, over and over. The routine wasn't meant to bore, but to erode the ego until only awareness remained. And yet, even in this life of endless repetition, you sense something luminous. The morning sun glints on every droplet of dew, every polished tile, every bowed head. You think about how quiet beauty can bloom from routine, how devotion can shape even a bowl of rice into an act of art. As you set down your empty cup, you feel strangely full. Not of food, exactly, but of calm. The abbot walks past, muttering something that sounds like a proverb. You catch only the end of it. Gratitude is a meal that never ends. You bow as he passes, then turn toward your next task, sweeping the world clean. The broom in your hands feels light, almost delicate, but when you lower it to the ground, it makes a crisp whshh against the gravel. The morning light has turned sharp now, thin rays cutting through the temple's eaves, throwing long shadows across the courtyard. This is the hour of sweeping, and every monk takes part, even the abbot. The act itself seems simple enough. Sweep the stones, clear the leaves, tidy the paths that curve between the gardens and wooden halls. But this isn't about cleanliness, it's meditation through motion. Every stroke of the broom is meant to mirror your breath, to turn repetition into rhythm, and rhythm into peace. You start slow, unsure whether to go clockwise or counterclockwise, then realize everyone else moves in silence, forming neat parallel lines, as if the courtyard itself breathes in patterns. A crow hops along the temple wall, watching like a skeptical supervisor. You can't help but smirk. The abbot notices and raises an eyebrow. His face doesn't move, but the message is clear. Even amusement must be mindful. You continue sweeping. Tiny dust motes rise and catch the sunlight like drifting gold. Your body remembers its own pace, back straight, movements smooth, grip gentle. You start to notice small things. The faint crunch of pebbles, the way the broom bristles bend and spring back, the shimmer of a spiderweb in the corner near the rain barrel. Zen teachings call this samu, mindful work. Historians still argue whether it emerged as a way to maintain discipline or as a rebellion against intellectual arrogance. Either way, it became central to monastic life, labor not as punishment but as prayer. At some point, the abbot passes near you, sweeping with the same small broom as everyone else. His movements are slow, precise, elegant, each stroke ending exactly where it began. There's no hierarchy in chores here. A master sweeps beside novices, all bound by the same dust. You remember hearing a story about a monk from the Kamakura period who achieved enlightenment while cleaning a garden. Legend says that as he brushed away fallen leaves, he realized that every speck of dust he cleared was also inside him. When the garden was spotless, so was his mind. You look at your patch of gravel and think, okay, I've got a long way to go. Your broom catches on a stubborn clump of wet leaves. You lean into it and the bristles snap with a tiny crack. You freeze, embarrassed. No one reacts, not even a flinch. The silence feels both forgiving and judgmental at once. You glance up and spot one of the older monks working near the gate. He's humming faintly, a soft, tuneless sound that might be mistaken for the wind. You realize it's not against the rules to hum. It's just rare to find someone calm enough to do it without disrupting the air. A faint drizzle begins, light as mist. The smell of wet cedar fills the courtyard. You keep sweeping, though now the dust has turned to a thin mud that sticks to your sandals. The rain beads on your shaved head, cool and clean. You think about how Japanese gardens were designed not to resist nature, but to embrace it. The monks of the 14th century built landscapes meant to change with every season. Autumn leaves falling like fire, winter snow resting like silk, spring moss softening stone. You realize the irony. All this sweeping, and the beauty still depends on what can't be controlled. A small bell rings in the distance, the signal for the next task, but no one rushes. Each monk finishes their final sweep, then bows to their broom. Yes, bows to it. You hesitate, then do the same. The broom has, after all, spent the last hour teaching you humility through splinters. There's an odd sense of satisfaction in watching your section of courtyard lie smooth and clean. The gravel shines like brushed silver. A stray maple leaf drifts down, lands right in the middle, and ruins the perfection instantly. You laugh quietly under your breath, earning another raised eyebrow from the abbot. You swear you see the corner of his mouth twitch, just slightly. As the monks gather the brooms, you notice how every movement carries that same quiet grace. Even returning a tool becomes ceremony. No wasted effort, no slouching, no sighing. You think of how many centuries this pattern has repeated, sunrise, sweeping, silence, and feel a strange comfort in it. Historians note that monasteries in the 1300s weren't just spiritual sanctuaries, they were also centers of cleanliness in an era when most towns stank of waste and smoke. The temple's reputation for order drew visitors, pilgrims, even samurai seeking calm before battle. It's said that one general once stayed 3 days at a monastery just to learn how to breathe again. You're beginning to understand why. As the drizzle fades, steam rises from the wet gravel. A lone pine needle sticks to your sleeve. You brush it off gently, feeling oddly connected to it. The courtyard now looks flawless again, but you know it won't last. Another gust of wind, another scatter of leaves, and the world will be untidy once more. And maybe that's the point. Perfection here is never permanent. You sweep not to make things perfect, but to remember that nothing stays that way. The abbot finally gives a small clap once. The monks bow toward the main hall. You follow, your body a little sore, your mind strangely light. As you step inside, the scent of wet earth clings to your robe, grounding you more deeply than any sermon ever could. The morning chores are over. The monastery hums quietly, alive in its own slow pulse. Somewhere, a kettle begins to boil, and the faint sound of chanting floats in from the inner shrine. You wipe your hands on your robe and glance back toward the courtyard. A single leaf falls again, landing softly on the swept path. This time, you let it be. When the chores end, the temple exhales. The sweepers lay down their brooms, the cooks scrub their pots, and from every hall, the faint hum of chanting fades into the still air. You return to your quarters, bare, wooden, serene, and kneel before a low desk. On it lies your next duty, a single sheet of parchment, an inkstone, and a brush thin enough to record a whisper. This is the hour of Shakyo, sutra copying. It's one of the most sacred acts in a Zen monastery, yet it feels almost mundane at first. Copying sacred scripture line by line, brushstroke by brushstroke, for hours. But the intent is not to read, nor even to write. It's to empty yourself through repetition until meaning itself dissolves into rhythm. You pour water onto the inkstone, grinding it with a black stick until it releases that deep, smoky fragrance of soot and pine resin. The scent is faintly sweet, oddly calming. Every monk knows it. Every stroke begins in that smell. The brush feels alive in your hand, the bristles damp, pliant, waiting. Before you begin, you bow 3 times. Once to the Buddha, once to the text, and once to your own impermanence. Then, with slow breath, You lower the brush to the parchment and trace the first character, mu, emptiness. The ink spreads slightly, a soft halo around the line. The temple is silent except for the scratching of brushes. Each monk sits at their desk, eyes lowered, hands steady. A faint breeze from the paper screen doors carries the scent of cedar and rain. Somewhere, a pigeon coos, and the sound feels like part of the rhythm. You write the next word, then another. The sutra unfolds across the page like a black river. Time ceases to matter. All that exists is brush, breath, ink, and patience. But soon, your hand begins to cramp. The ink grows thicker, your strokes less graceful. You feel frustration creeping in. Your mind, meant to be still, starts to chatter. Asterisk, why am I doing this? How much longer? Why can't I make this line perfect? Asterisk. And then you remember what one old monk said last night as you washed bowls together. Perfection is the enemy of sincerity. You let your next stroke falter slightly, deliberately. The brush wavers. The ink bleeds. It feels like a confession on paper, honest, human, imperfect. And strangely, that tiny mistake looks beautiful. Many centuries from now, historians will marvel at these copied sutras, noting how even the smallest variations, an uneven character, a smudged corner, reveal the emotion of the scribe. In this era, monks believed each copy carried the maker's karma, their hidden thoughts pressed into the ink. You pause and stretch your fingers. Outside, a few raindrops hit the paper wall with soft taps. You look at the characters you've written, rows of perfect and imperfect symbols, and realize that they all say the same thing. The world is impermanent. One of the senior monks passes behind you, his bare feet silent on the floorboards. He glances down at your work, nods almost imperceptibly, then moves on. His approval feels like sunlight through clouds. You continue, stroke by stroke, line by line. Hours pass unnoticed. The ink runs low. You grind more. The rhythm resumes. There's something hypnotic about it, like breathing with your hands. Eventually, your page fills. You sign the corner not with your name, but with a single small circle. Enso, the Zen symbol of completeness within incompleteness. You blow gently to dry the ink, then lift the parchment by its edges. The characters glisten like wet obsidian. The abbot enters, his robes whispering across the floor. He carries a stack of old sutras, some centuries older than the temple itself. Without a word, he places yours atop the pile. The faintest smile touches his lips before he leaves again. You wonder how many nameless hands have copied the same words through the centuries. Each monk thinking their life fleeting, their writing insignificant, never realizing their brushstrokes would one day outlive dynasties. You clean your brush carefully, rinsing the bristles until the water runs clear. Then you close the inkstone, fold your knees under you, and bow once more to the silence that remains after the ink has spoken. Outside, the rain has stopped. The clouds part just enough to let a sliver of light fall across your desk, illuminating the black strokes. The air smells of ink, rain, and pine, 3 notes of a single, eternal chord. For a moment, you imagine the entire monastery as one great sutra, walls written in moss, roofs inscribed in shadow, gravel paths brushed into verses that the wind will erase. And you, a single character within it, temporary, but complete. The temple bell tolls again, low and steady, announcing the hour when the outside world is briefly allowed to seep through the gates. You set down your brush and stretch your shoulders, the smell of ink still clinging faintly to your fingers. For most of the day, the monastery feels sealed away from time itself. No laughter, no bargaining, no gossip. But today, as you step toward the gatehouse, you find that the line between silence and sound begins to blur. Visitors have arrived. 2 peasants stand just beyond the threshold, their sandals dripping from the morning rain. They bow deeply, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth, an offering of dried persimmons, meant to buy a prayer for a sick child. Behind them, a young samurai adjusts his sword hilt, clearly uncomfortable in this world of quiet eyes and bare feet. And just beyond him, Half hidden under a parasol, waits a noblewoman's attendant, carrying a scroll sealed with red wax. You take your place beside the gatekeeper, another monk whose job it is to receive these small human intrusions into the monastery's calm rhythm. He speaks softly, with a voice so gentle it could almost be mistaken for wind through bamboo. Each visitor kneels, places their offering upon the mat, and murmurs their request. Sometimes it's for health, sometimes safe childbirth, sometimes rain for the fields, or mercy for the dead. And occasionally, the visitor asks for something more elusive: peace of mind. The samurai bows stiffly and whispers that he's haunted by the faces of those he's slain. You notice how his hands shake when he presses them together. The monk simply nods, takes the offering of coins, and promises that the prayers will begin at dusk. The samurai lingers, as though expecting a conversation that will never come, then leaves, his armor clinking faintly down the path. It's strange, you think, how the monastery, supposedly apart from the world, still serves as its quiet nerve center. Behind the stillness, there's influence. Lords endow temples with land to win favor in this life and the next. Monks advise governors. Information passes from pilgrim to monk to messenger. Historians still argue whether monasteries in 14th century Japan were purely spiritual sanctuaries or subtle power brokers wrapped in incense smoke. You step aside to let the noblewoman's servant approach. He kneels, unrolling a thin scroll with delicate brushstrokes, an invitation to the abbot from a nearby daimyo. It requests prayers for the ancestor of a newly built castle, a gesture both pious and political. The abbot will likely send 2 monks to perform the rites, and their presence will ensure that the temple remains favored and funded. You help the gatekeeper roll the scroll again and set it aside. The servant bows low, and for a brief second, his eyes meet yours. He looks curious, maybe even envious. Perhaps he's wondering what it would be like to live in such stillness. You could tell him the truth. It's not easy, and it's rarely silent inside your own head. When the last visitor departs, the gates close with a dull wooden thud. The courtyard returns to its soft hush. You carry the offerings inside, a few persimmons, a pouch of coins, and 1 folded paper prayer. The coins go to the bursar, who counts them with fingers that never seem to forget the weight of poverty. The persimmons go to the kitchen, where the cook bows to you in thanks. Later, you'll see the abbot reading the noblewoman's letter in the shade of the veranda. His face is calm, unreadable. He murmurs something about how worldly power is just another kind of storm, loud, temporary, and destined to pass. You don't know if he's condemning it or just watching it drift by. Afterward, the visiting hour ends, and the monks gather in the garden to wash their hands. The water glides over your skin, cool and clear, carrying away the faint traces of the outside world. A younger monk asks quietly, "Do you ever miss it?" "The world," you reply. He nods. You look toward the forested hills beyond the wall. There's a tiny plume of smoke, maybe from a farmer's fire, maybe from a distant war camp. Sometimes, you admit, but only until the next bell. He smiles, understanding. In this place, time is not measured by the sun but by sound. The chime that calls you, the chant that carries you, the silence that swallows both. By afternoon, a few more visitors drift in, a traveling poet who wishes to read his verses to the abbot, a widow asking that her late husband's name be written on a prayer tablet, a merchant bringing a gift of paper made from mulberry bark. You help record their names in a long ledger, each line carefully brushed in black ink. One name after another, all seeking something unseen. As the sun slides lower, the gate is barred again. You walk along the veranda, watching the last of the visitors vanish down the stone path, their straw hats bobbing between the pines. The quiet returns, wrapping itself around the temple like a robe. Inside, the faint smell of persimmons mingles with incense. The abbot's chanting begins again, low and resonant, as though speaking to the very air. Somewhere a bell rings 3 times, and you realize it marks not just the closing of the gate, but the closing of another small chapter in a centuries-old rhythm. The monastery, for all its seclusion, remains a living bridge between heaven and earth, where peasants, samurai, and nobles all kneel on the same worn mat, whispering the same fragile hopes into the same still air. And you, sitting in the half-light, feel something shift quietly inside you, a strange blend of pity, reverence, and peace. Maybe the outside world never truly leaves. You just learn to watch it pass through like rain through bamboo. The courtyard hums with the lazy drone of cicadas as you step into the shade of the pine grove behind the main hall. It's the hour of afternoon debate, a tradition that turns quiet monks into philosophers with gentle tempers and fierce opinions. You wouldn't think the path to enlightenment involved so much arguing, yet here it is, robes rustling, hands gesturing, minds sparring beneath the trees. You take your seat on a flat stone beside two senior monks. They bow in greeting before diving straight into it. Today's question: can enlightenment survive laughter? One monk insists that laughter is a form of attachment, a disturbance of inner stillness. He quotes from the Shobogenzo, the writings of Dogen himself, founder of the Soto Zen school, arguing that awakening means transcending emotion entirely. The other monk grins, plucks a pine needle, and flicks it toward him. And yet, he says, even the Buddha smiled. You try not to laugh, but it's hard. A few younger monks nearby do laugh, softly, their hands over their mouths. The first monk frowns, but his eyes glint with amusement. The debate continues, measured, poetic, playful. This isn't a fight, it's a kind of calligraphy of thought. Every phrase is brushed carefully, each counterpoint formed with respect. The rhythm of it is almost musical. Sometimes the topics turn arcane, like whether sound exists if no one hears it, or whether the moon reflected in water is real. At other times, they touch something painfully human. Today, one novice dares to ask, if all life is illusion, why does suffering feel so real? No one answers right away. A breeze moves through the pines, carrying the smell of earth and old bark. Then the abbot, who's been listening quietly from the veranda, says, because illusion has teeth. Everyone chuckles softly. Even the stern monk allows himself a smile. You've heard that same abbot once studied at Mount High, the great Tendai Monastery outside Kyoto. There, debates could last for days, and monks would shout themselves hoarse trying to prove subtle points of doctrine. But in this smaller temple, the tone is different. Less competition, more contemplation. Still, you sense the same current beneath it, a need to make sense of the ineffable, to carve logic into the mist. Historians still argue whether these debates were genuine spiritual exercises or just intellectual theater. Monks rehearsing enlightenment the way samurai rehearse sword forms. The abbot rises slowly, dusting pine needles from his robe. Laughter, he says, is a mirror. It shows you when your seriousness has become vanity. And with that, the session ends. But not entirely. As the monks disperse, smaller conversations bloom. You find yourself walking with an older scholar monk whose head shines like polished wood. He speaks of how ideas flow between China and Japan, how Zen itself traveled like a seed on the wind, first sprouting in Tang, China, then blooming differently here. We borrowed silence, he says, and added rain. He chuckles at his own metaphor, and you find yourself doing the same. You pause near the pond where dragonflies skim across the surface, their wings catching the light. The scholar monk stops too, and points toward their reflections. See that, he says. The dragonfly flies above the water, but its reflection always follows. The self is like that. You can chase enlightenment, but your reflection will never vanish. It only moves when you do. You nod, unsure whether to feel enlightened or confused. Later, as the afternoon drifts on, the monks gather again for a lighter exchange. One quotes a Chinese proverb, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him." Another counters, "Only if he's charging admission." Everyone laughs, the sound soft and contagious. You realize that these quiet bursts of humor are what keep the monastery from becoming unbearable. Beneath all the silence and strictness, laughter is a kind of secret oxygen. The debates sometimes veer into strange corners. One monk insists that enlightenment is instant, like lightning. Another claims it's gradual, like dawn. Historians still debate this too, the sudden versus gradual argument that shaped centuries of Zen thought. You watch the two monks gesture with their sleeves, voices calm, but eyes alight. The abbot listens, eyes half closed, perhaps pretending to nap, or maybe meditating on their words. You can never tell. As shadows lengthen, the discussion fades into an easy quiet. The abbot finally opens his eyes and says, "Both lightning and dawn come from the same sky." No one replies. They just bow. Somehow that's enough. The evening bell rings in the distance, and the monks begin to file back toward the hall. You stay behind for a moment, watching the last sunrays drip like gold through the pines. The debate still echoes in your head, like a half-remembered dream. You think about laughter, enlightenment, illusion, reflection, all of it blending into one shimmering thought that refuses to hold still. Then, as you turn to go, you notice a single pine cone has fallen at your feet. You pick it up, feel its rough texture, and smile. Somehow, it feels like an answer. By the time the afternoon debates end, the sun has slipped low enough to soften every edge in the courtyard. Shadows stretch like silk threads across the gravel, and the faint scent of barley and smoke drifts from the kitchen. It's time for Otsutom Gohan, the midday meal, though midday has long passed. In the monastery, the clock is measured in bells, not hours, and hunger is just another illusion to observe without judgment. You join the quiet line of monks as they move toward the dining hall, each carrying a wooden bowl wrapped in a white cloth. No one speaks. Even the shuffling of sandals sounds polite, deliberate, as though the very air has agreed to behave. Inside, the room glows with the amber light of oil lamps. Rows of monks kneel on tatami mats before low tables, each table set with almost identical precision. 3 small bowls, a pair of chopsticks, a folded napkin, and a ladle of water. The meal, as always, is modest. Rice, lentil stew, a few slices of pickled radish, and sometimes, if fortune smiles, a cube of tofu floating like a soft moon. You settle onto your mat, unwrap your bowl, and place it before you with care. Then, all together, the monks recite the 5 reflections, a short chant of gratitude, half prayer and half mindfulness exercise. You mumble along, not out of laziness, but out of awe. How many mouths, over how many centuries, have whispered these same syllables before eating the same humble meal? Then silence. Absolute. You raise your bowl, inhale the faint steam, and take the first bite. The rice is warm but plain, the lentils earthy, the radish sharp enough to wake you from any lingering drowsiness. Every flavor feels amplified because it's earned through hours of stillness and work. You glance at the monk beside you, a young novice whose head is shaved unevenly. He's struggling not to slurp too loudly. A small drop of stew lands on his robe, and his face contorts in silent horror. You stifle a laugh. There it is again, that tiny spark of humanity beneath all the ritual. The abbot, seated at the front, eats with the same grace as he meditates. Slow, deliberate, unshakable. You once heard someone say that watching a true monk eat is like watching a mountain breathe. When everyone finishes, you pour a little hot water into your bowl, swish it around, and drink the mixture. A practical and spiritual act. Nothing is wasted, not even the rinse water. The last sip, the abbot once said, reminds you that gratitude has no leftovers. Afterward, the monks clean up silently, folding cloths, stacking bowls. The only sounds are the soft clicks of wood and ceramic. Then, just as the hall begins to empty, someone lets out a quiet hiccup. It's the novice. A ripple of suppressed laughter spreads like a wave. The abbot glances up, eyes sharp, unreadable, and for a second, you all freeze. Then, to everyone's surprise, he chuckles. The body speaks when the mind has forgotten it exists, he says. The tension breaks, replaced by a gentle warmth. The rest of the afternoon feels lighter. You and a few others linger outside the hall, basking in the mild sunlight. A cicada lands on a bamboo post, buzzing so close you can feel the vibration in your chest. One monk comments that maybe the cicada's song is its final sermon before death. Another replies, or just its way of saying lunch was good. Everyone laughs quietly. There's no real leisure in a monastery, but these small pauses, these in-between moments, become their own form of rest. You find yourself sitting cross-legged by the garden wall, watching the sky fade from blue to amber. The scent of cooking smoke mingles with the resin of the pines. You think about how even the simplest meal here feels significant, almost holy. Out in the world, food might be a distraction or a comfort. Here, it's a mirror. Every bite reflects your discipline, your patience, your awareness. Historians still debate how strictly Zen monasteries followed dietary rules in the 14th century. Some records claim absolute vegetarianism, others hint at the occasional fish offered by noble patrons. You've heard whispers that, during harsh winters, even monks have accepted such gifts for compassion's sake. But in this temple, the rule holds firm: no killing, no indulgence. Just rice, lentils, pickles, gratitude. You stretch, feeling the faint ache in your back from sitting all day. The sun has nearly dipped behind the mountain ridge, leaving streaks of rose light across the clouds. Somewhere in the kitchen, a novice hums tunelessly while washing pots. It's technically against the rules, but no one stops him. You smile. Even here, discipline bends under the weight of simple joy. Before evening meditation, you walk down to the edge of the forest path, where the breeze carries a hint of coolness. You can see the far-off silhouette of the mountains turning indigo against the fading sky. The same mountains you glimpsed this morning now look softer, dreamier, like they, too, are ready to sleep. You think about how days here feel endless yet vanish like breath. Meals, prayers, chores, chants, all looping in perfect, quiet rhythm. It's a kind of beauty that's easy to overlook unless you surrender to it fully. A bell rings in the distance, calling everyone back for evening practice. You rise slowly, brushing dust from your robe. As you turn, the smell of lentils still lingers in the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of the persimmons left at the altar earlier. And just before you step inside, you catch yourself smiling again for no reason at all. Maybe that's the closest thing to enlightenment you've felt all day. The light softens into gold, then into blue. The world outside the monastery walls begins to fade, and the garden waits, silent, raked, breathing. This is your favorite hour, when the air grows cool and the first stars shimmer faintly through the thin mist above the trees. It's time to tend the karasansui, the dry landscape garden, the monastery's silent scripture written in gravel and stone. You kneel at the edge of the courtyard, picking up a wooden rake polished smooth from years of use. The teeth of the rake are worn unevenly, giving the patterns a slightly human imperfection. The abbot says that's what makes it beautiful. If it were perfect, he likes to say, the wind wouldn't love it. You begin to rake, pulling the tool slowly through the fine gravel, tracing careful ripples around the mossy stones. Each motion feels like breathing. Draw in, pull the rake, exhale, lift it gently. The sound is soft, almost like cloth being folded. The garden isn't large, maybe the size of a small courtyard, but it feels infinite when you're within it. The stones stand like islands, their shadows deepening with every passing minute. Around them, the gravel swirls like waves, and as you move, you start to lose the sense of where your body ends and the patterns begin. A younger monk joins you. His job is to gather fallen leaves, but every time he bends down, more drift from the trees. They fall faster when I pick them up, he whispers, exasperated. You grin and reply, maybe they just want attention. He laughs quietly, earning a disapproving glance from a senior monk on the veranda, but even that monk's lips twitch at the corners. The evening air smells of pine, sand, and the faint smoke from the kitchens where the last embers of the fire are dying. Somewhere nearby, a night heron croaks, its cry echoing like a single, ancient syllable. The abbot steps into the garden, hands clasped in his sleeves, his gaze resting on the patterns you've made. He doesn't speak for a long time. Then he says, a well-raked garden is like a well-lived life. It looks effortless, but it isn't. You bow slightly, unsure whether to take it as praise or instruction. He moves closer, pointing to one of the stones, a rough, dark one with a shallow groove down its side. "That stone," he says, "came from the river behind the temple. We carried it here 50 years ago. Its scar came from being struck by another stone during a flood. We left it that way. The wound is part of its balance." You look again, and indeed, the groove catches the last slant of light, glowing faintly gold. Historians still debate whether these gardens were meant purely for meditation or if they also served as coded spiritual diagrams, maps of mountains, oceans, or even entire cosmologies. Some say the placement of each stone corresponds to Buddhist sutras, others that it mirrors the islands of Japan. The monks here seem unconcerned with such theories. For them, it's enough that the act of raking is meditation itself. You change direction, dragging the rake in long, parallel lines that meet at perfect right angles, dividing the space between the islands. The patterns catch the light differently as dusk deepens, creating the illusion of gentle movement, as though water is truly flowing beneath the surface. When you pause to rest your wrists, a moth flutters past your face, landing briefly on the rake handle. Its wings look like crumpled parchment, marked with two small blacks that resemble eyes. You watch it breathe. Then, as if satisfied with your work, it lifts and vanishes into the twilight. The abbot lingers nearby. "Do you know what the gravel represents?" he asks. "Water," you answer automatically. He smiles. "And the stones?" "Islands, mountains, stillness." He nods, then tilts his head. "Or perhaps the gravel is emptiness, and the stones are the moments that disturb it. Either way, you're the wind." You think about that as you continue raking, the lines overlapping slightly now like layers of thought. The sky above turns deep indigo, and the first temple lanterns flicker to life, their light reflecting off the gravel like stars scattered across a miniature cosmos. You notice something else. The rake marks you made earlier are already softening, the edges blurring as the evening air settles. Tomorrow morning, you'll rake it again, and the patterns will be new. Nothing lasts, not even your neatest efforts. And somehow, that thought brings you peace. By the time you finish, the garden looks serene, balanced, alive. You bow toward it, not as a craftsman admiring his work, but as a witness acknowledging impermanence. You step back onto the veranda, brushing gravel dust from your hands. The abbot is gone, replaced by silence and the rhythmic creak of night insects. You take one last look at the garden, its ripples glowing faintly under the lanterns. You think of all the eyes that will see it tomorrow morning, fresh, as if it had just appeared. No one will know the lines you erased, the small errors you corrected, the thoughts you had while raking. And maybe that's the point. The world, like the garden, is always being remade in secret. You walk away barefoot, your steps soft on the tatami, the echo of the rake still whispering in your memory. Night settles over the monastery like a dark silk curtain, soft and heavy, yet welcoming. The scent of pine, incense, and faintly burnt wood lingers in the cool air. The evening bell rings slowly, each toll stretching through the courtyard, threading the temple together in a rhythm both ancient and immediate. You pull your robe tighter, feeling the damp chill from the evening air, and move toward the meditation hall once more. This is the hour of evening zazen, the second round of seated meditation. Your legs ache slightly from a morning session, your back still stiff from hours of sutra copying and garden raking, but the abbot encourages perseverance. "Pain is the mind's whisper," he once said. "Listen, don't flee." You kneel on your straw cushion and cross your legs. The hall is dim, lit only by a row of candles that flicker against the polished wood. Shadows dance along the walls, elongating the figures of monks into thin, silent specters. The air smells of beeswax, smoke, and damp tatami. The first breaths are always the hardest. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Your mind immediately wants to wander. Tomorrow's chores, the world beyond the gates, a fleeting craving for a warm meal. You push the thoughts away, not with force, but like nudging a leaf floating down a stream. Beside you, a novice shifts ever so slightly, the scrape of straw against straw like a reminder that you are alive, not an automaton. The abbot walks silently down the aisle, eyes half closed, Kyosaku in hand. You brace yourself, not for punishment, but for clarity. A gentle tap on your shoulder sends a shiver through your spine. Focus returns. You remember a fringe story. A monk once meditated so intently that he allegedly sat for 3 days without food or sleep. Scholars still argue whether that is literal truth or exaggeration, a moral tale about devotion taken to extremes. You decide it's best not to test the theory firsthand. Outside, a soft wind pushes against the paper screens, carrying the faint croak of a distant frog. Somewhere, water drips steadily from the edge of the roof. You breathe in the sound, letting it anchor your attention. The tick of time becomes imperceptible. Only the present exists, unfolding with each inhalation and exhalation. Your mind drifts briefly. Images of the day's tasks swirl in ghostly replay. Raked gravel, ink-stained hands, the laughter of a novice, the subtle bow of the abbot. Every act, mundane yet sacred, seems threaded into the evening stillness. You begin to understand how practice and awareness merge, how life itself becomes the meditation. The abbot pauses in front of the altar, hands folded, eyes closed. A candle flickers and casts a shadow across his serene face. For a moment, he seems less human than a presence, a living part of the temple's rhythm. As you sit, fatigue meets focus. Your body aches, your eyes sting, but your mind feels sharp, pliant. Thoughts drift in, drift out, and slowly, one by one, dissolve. In this darkness, you notice your heartbeat as if for the first time. Slow, steady, anchored in the silence. Even your pain has softened. It's no longer resistance, but companion. Finally, the bell tolls 3 times, signaling the end of evening meditation. Movement is gentle, deliberate. You rise, bow to the Buddha, bow to your cushion, and step into the veranda. The night air kisses your skin, carrying with it the subtle aroma of pine and distant water. A few monks begin sweeping the courtyard again, rakes whispering across gravel, reinforcing the eternal rhythm of order, reflection, and impermanence. You pause, noticing how life in the monastery flows seamlessly from task to task, meditation to chore, silence to light laughter. As you move toward your quarters, you glimpse the sky, now a deep navy, stars pricking through the darkness like tiny lanterns. The world beyond the temple gates waits, but for tonight, the monastery exists as its own universe, quiet, disciplined, yet surprisingly alive. You kneel briefly at your doorway, inhaling the cool night, letting the lessons of the day settle in like soft sediment. Even in solitude, you feel the pulse of centuries of monks breathing in unison, guiding you toward understanding, patience, and the subtle joy of being present. Night deepens. The courtyard is nearly black now, except for the faint glow of lanterns, casting pools of amber light that seem to float on the gravel. Crickets begin their chorus, soft and rhythmic, blending with the distant murmur of a mountain stream. You step outside your quarters, sandals in hand, to feel the cool air wrap around your shoulders. There's a quiet clarity that only comes after the full day's work, the body tired, the mind steady, the heart just enough awake to notice everything. The monks are preparing for the final ritual of the day, the evening service in the inner shrine. You follow them silently, footsteps light on polished wood. The hall smells of beeswax, incense, and old paper, a combination that you are beginning to recognize as the very essence of the monastery itself. The flickering candles cast shadows that stretch long across the tatami, elongating the monks' figures into statues of devotion. You kneel at the edge of the altar platform. The abbot is already in position, robes folded neatly, hands raised in silent prayer. The air hums with anticipation. Though you've witnessed this service many times, there is always a sense of awe, an unspoken thread connecting every monk in the hall to everyone who has sat here before, across centuries. The chant begins, low, resonant, syllables rolling from the lips of the monks like gentle waves. You repeat softly, aligning breath with sound, letting each phrase dissolve into your awareness. The words are familiar yet mysterious, carrying weight and weightlessness all at once. Somewhere between devotion and discipline, you find a kind of suspension where the world falls away, leaving only presence. Occasionally, a candle sputters, smoke curling upward. You watch the smoke twist and dance, imagining it carrying prayers up to the unseen. The abbot shifts slightly, and you notice his hands, strong, steady, capable of both discipline and gentle guidance. You wonder how many nights he has spent exactly like this, each service both unique and eternal. Legends whisper that monks have stayed in these halls for weeks without sleep, chanting and meditating, their voices blending into the night until even the forest seems to echo them. Historians still argue whether such feats were miraculous or simply the product of discipline combined with human endurance. Either way, you feel the pull of centuries in the rhythm of the chant. A young novice near you shivers, and the abbot, in a gesture almost imperceptible, taps his shoulder with a kyosaku. Not a reprimand, but a reminder. Stay present. You take a deep breath and refocus, noticing the weight of your own body, the rise and fall of your chest, the tiny noises that make up this sacred silence. Time dissolves. The world outside no longer exists. All that is the slow, deliberate vibration of chant and breath, the flicker of candlelight, and the soft, earthy smell of the temple. You realize that here, even the smallest sound, the scrape of a sandal, the rustle of robes, is part of a greater harmony. When the final syllable fades, the hall feels impossibly vast. Monks bow, one after another, until the echo of their movements settles like dust in the corners. You rise slowly, palms together, feeling both weightless and rooted. The abbot gives a single nod, and you know that the day, in all its fullness, is complete. Outside, the night is deeper now, almost velvet black, with the stars bright against the sky. The garden lies in stillness, the gravel patterns undisturbed, the stones like silent witnesses. You walk back to your quarters, senses heightened by the ritual, heart quiet yet brimming with a subtle warmth. You pause briefly at the threshold, noticing the faint glow of lanterns reflecting in puddles from earlier rain. Everything seems calm, complete, and alive in its own measured way. Tonight, the monastery breathes in sync with you. The monastery now rests in near total darkness, broken only by the soft, flickering glow of a few lanterns placed along the paths. The wind carries the faint scent of damp pine and moss, and somewhere in the distance, a frog croaks a low, steady rhythm. You step carefully along the stone pathway toward the meditation hall for your final walk of the day, sandals in hand, feeling the cool stones beneath your bare feet. This is the hour of reflection, a personal ritual that the abbot encourages before lights out. Each monk walks the ground slowly, intentionally, paying attention to the weight of each footfall, the rustle of robes, the subtle breath of night in the garden. You pause at the edge of the koi pond, watching the water darken under the starry sky. The fish glide beneath the surface, unseen but alive, rippling the reflection of the moon. You think about the day. The morning chores, the sutra copying, the midday meal, the afternoon debates, and the evening rituals, all flow together now like a single thread. Each action, however small, is part of the rhythm, part of a lesson in impermanence and presence. Even the mundane moments, the broom scraping across gravel, the scratch of ink on paper, the clink of bowls, feel significant. A night heron lands on a nearby branch, croaking softly. You pause and listen, noticing the hollow resonance in its call. There is a story that in some monasteries, the sound of animals during the night was interpreted as messages from the unseen world, hints or reminders of impermanence. Historians still argue whether such interpretations were symbolic or taken literally, but the effect on the monk's awareness is undeniable. You continue your slow circuit of the grounds, noting the contours of stones in the dry garden, the way shadows stretch over moss-covered steps, and the soft whisper of wind through bamboo. Each detail is absorbed without judgment, recorded in memory as if for the first time. Along the veranda, you notice the abbot seated quietly, hands folded, eyes on the darkened garden. He does not speak. His presence is enough. The monastery itself seems to lean toward him, attentive and patient, like a student awaiting instruction. You realize that he has spent decades training not just in meditation, but in the art of stillness and observation. The stars shine brighter now, scattered across the sky like tiny lanterns. One cloud drifts lazily across, dimming the silver glow briefly before passing on. You pause, reflecting on the subtle cycles of the temple and of life itself, action and stillness, day and night, sound and silence, each in balance. Returning to your quarters, you carefully lay out your bedding. The tatami feels cool against your skin, a gentle contrast to the warmth still lingering in your body from the day's labors. You take a moment to stretch, then kneel quietly, hands folded. Even in solitude, the sense of continuity, of connection with centuries of monks before you, is tangible. Outside, the night continues, unhurried and vast. The gentle rustle of leaves, the faint drip of condensation from the eaves, the distant call of a night creature, all blend into a lullaby for the monastery. You lie down, eyes tracing the fading shadows on the wall, mind tracing the day's movements, letting each act settle like fine sand. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, but for now, the world feels complete, balanced, and unhurried. You close your eyes, allowing the rhythm of the monastery, the sound of distant bells, and the echo of the day's lessons to lull you into sleep. The night deepens further, but the monastery is far from lifeless. You hear the gentle scrape of a broom in the courtyard, a monk finishing his final sweep, ensuring that the gravel is neat under the moonlight. The sound is faint, almost melodic, and it reminds you that even in darkness, the rhythm of the monastery persists. You step lightly along the veranda, careful not to disturb the quiet harmony. Your path takes you past the kitchen, where the faint scent of leftover rice mingles with the earthy aroma of winter squash stored for tomorrow's meal. A novice quietly sorts firewood, arranging each piece with methodical care. The abbot said once that even menial tasks performed with awareness are forms of meditation. Now you see it for yourself. The arrangement of stones, the stacking of wood, the folding of cloth, all actions become expressions of mindfulness when done fully, with attention. In the inner hall, the last candle flickers. Its glow casts soft, trembling light across the walls, illuminating calligraphy scrolls depicting mountains, rivers, and meditative phrases. You pause for a moment to study them. Each brushstroke holds a sense of calm urgency, a paradox that mirrors your day. Scholars still debate how much artistic expression influenced the spiritual life of monks. Was it purely decorative, a form of didactic instruction, or a meditation in itself? You walk toward the small shrine at the end of the hall. Incense curls in lazy spirals, releasing a faint fragrance of sandalwood and pine resin. Kneeling, you bow slowly, hands pressed together. The rhythm of your breath aligns with the lingering smoke as it rises and dissipates. It is a quiet moment, a gentle punctuation at the end of a long day. Outside, the wind whispers through the pines, carrying the scent of rain from distant mountains. You notice the pattern of shadows moving across the courtyard, distorted by lantern light. Each ripple of stone and shadow reminds you that nothing is fixed, not even the ordered perfection you've labored to create. Impermanence is everywhere, and yet, within that transience, there is serenity. You walk slowly back to your quarters, mind soft and alert at once. Every sound, the faint rustle of robes, the distant croak of a night creature, the whisper of wind, feels amplified in the quiet night. Even the gravel beneath your feet seems to respond to your presence. When you reach your futon, you sit for a few moments, folding your legs beneath you. The day's lessons pass through your mind like a gentle stream, sweeping, sutra copying meal rituals, garden raking, debates, chanting, and final reflection. Each task, mundane and sacred, blends into a continuous thread. You realize that the practice of the day is never finished. It only pauses, waiting to begin anew. Finally, you lie down. The cool tatami beneath you is grounding. The night air brushes lightly against your skin through the open screen door. Somewhere, a far-off bell tolls, a soft reminder of cycles, continuity, and the invisible presence of countless monks who walked this path before you. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the monastery wash over you. Every breath, every heartbeat, every shadowed corner feels part of the same gentle symphony. The world outside has disappeared entirely, leaving only the monastery suspended in the soft darkness of night. You lie on your futon, feeling the straw weave beneath your back, the subtle weight of the blanket, and the faint chill of the evening air drifting through the open paper screens. Even the distant sounds, the creak, the occasional croak of a frog, the whispering wind, feel intimate, like the quiet exhalation of a place that has existed unchanged for centuries. Tonight, your mind drifts over the day's rituals once more. The morning chores, sutra copying, debates, meals, garden raking, meditation, each task a ripple, connecting you to countless generations of monks who performed the same actions with the same delicate attention. You realize that what may seem tedious from the outside is actually the architecture of calm, the scaffolding of discipline that allows the spirit to settle. You remember the abbot's words during the final chant, "Presence is the simplest form of compassion." In them, you feel a gentle push toward understanding, not intellectual, not literal, but something sensed in the chest and mind simultaneously. You think about the novice who hiccuped during the evening meal and the way the abbot smiled instead of scolding. Even small moments of imperfection are woven into the day, teaching patience and acceptance. Outside, the lanterns flicker faintly, their reflections trembling in small puddles and the still pond. You hear a solitary cricket, its song more resonant now in the still night. Somehow, even the tiniest creatures have a role in the temple's rhythm, participating in the symphony of calm without conscious effort. Historians still debate whether this attention to minor detail was central to monastic life or simply anecdotal, yet you feel its truth with each breath you take. Your thoughts turn inward. You feel the warmth in your hands and feet, the subtle ache from long hours of sitting, the faint tension along your back. You let each sensation exist, without judgment. Even your wandering thoughts, once restless, now drift like leaves in a quiet pond, moving without collision or disruption. The sky outside has deepened to a near-black canvas, stars twinkling faintly through gaps in the clouds. The mountains beyond the temple walls loom as dark, protective silhouettes. You imagine the countless nights monks have lain awake under the same stars, performing the same rituals, their lives blending seamlessly with the landscape, the air, the wind, and the gravel underfoot. The monastery breathes with you as you lie still. You notice the faint fragrance of incense lingering in the room, the subtle warmth of the evening sun still retained in the wooden walls, the soft creak of the floor as it settles. You let the day dissolve completely, your mind melting into the rhythm of centuries, feeling both infinitesimal and connected, fleeting and eternal. Slowly, you allow your breath to lengthen, your heartbeat to slow, and your body to sink deeper into the futon. The temple's silence, once a series of actions, now becomes a soft, encompassing presence, wrapping you like a gentle robe. You feel the lessons of the day, discipline, patience, impermanence, presence, and even subtle joy, permeate your mind without force, settling in layers like fine sand in a quiet stream. The night continues its quiet vigil, crickets singing, wind whispering through the pines, water dripping softly in the distance. You're still listening, breathing, present. Each sound, each faint motion, each subtle scent carries the wisdom of countless days and nights lived in quiet attention. And as you finally drift toward sleep, you know that the monastery, its routines, its gardens, its chants, its rituals, its silent presence, remains with you, not as a place, but as a rhythm within your own being, ready to return tomorrow and every day thereafter. Now, the day has ended, and the monastery holds you in its quiet embrace. Every shadow, every flicker of candlelight, every faint scent of pine or incense lingers softly around you, comforting and unhurried. Your body rests, sinking into the futon, muscles releasing their tension, joints easing, and your mind, after the full cycle of chores, meditation, debate, and ritual, begins to slow. The day's rhythm settles gently in your chest, like water pooling in a quiet basin. Outside, the wind moves through the pines, whispering in gentle waves. Crickets continue their song, faint and steady, like a lullaby woven from centuries of quiet nights. The stars, distant and unchanging, twinkle softly, indifferent yet strangely intimate. You imagine the monks who have come before, walking these same halls, performing the same tasks, feeling the same wind and stars, their lives now folding into yours across time. Your breath becomes longer, smoother, deeper. You feel it travel down into your belly, rising and falling naturally. Each inhale carries calm, each exhale releases tension. The day's work, its minor frustrations, its tiny joys and small victories dissolve into the night, leaving only awareness, presence, and gentle peace. Every sound, the soft scrape of wood, the subtle rustle of leaves, the faint drip of water, is a reminder that life continues even in stillness. The monastery's rhythm is now part of you. Its silence, its rituals, and its care for impermanence infuse your consciousness, as if you carry the temple's quiet heartbeat inside. And so, you drift fully into rest. The lessons of patience, presence, and acceptance linger like a warm, invisible blanket. The night enfolds you, the stars watch over you, and the wind whispers softly in your ear. The monastery, and its centuries of quiet devotion, is with you still, carrying you gently into sleep. Sweet dreams.